In this mini-lecture we will discuss urbanization, sprawl, urban planning, transportation, benefits and drawbacks of cities, and urban ecology. After reading Chapter 12 and watching this video or reading the transcript that goes with this video, you should be able to describe the scale of urbanization, assess urban and suburban sprawl, outline city and regional planning and land uses strategies, evaluate transportation options, urban parks, and green buildings, analyze environmental impacts and advantages of urban centers, assess urban ecology and the pursuit of sustainable cities. As was described in Chapter 8, when countries develop they generally go through the demographic transition. This transition has occurred in European countries, the US, Japan, Canada and several other developed countries over the past 200 to 300 years. It is not guaranteed that all developing countries will go through this exact model of development, but the general pattern that can be expected is that as countries industrialize, people tend to move from the rural areas of the country to the cities and suburbs. In fact, 2009 was the first time in human history that more people lived in cities and suburbs and in rural areas. This movement from the countryside to cities and towns is called urbanization. Urbanization is both a driver for and is driven by industrialization. Urbanization is driven by industrialization because industrialization reduces the need for farmers, thus sending people to the cities to look for work. Urbanization also leads to technology advancements that boost production, thus urbanization spurs more industrialization. Urban populations are growing rapidly. Since 1950 the world's urban population has multiplied about 5 times, while the rural population has yet to double in that time. Rapid growth in urbanization is fueled by 1. General human population growth, and 2. Movement of people from farms or rural areas to cities, as can be seen in this graph. In developed nations, urbanization, as well as population growth, has slowed and is predicted to stay steady. In this graph the solid lines show past data and the dashed lines indicate population growth projections. In contrast to developed nations, developing nations are urbanizing rapidly. This is because these countries are beginning to transition to an industrialized society and thus people are moving from the farms to the cities more. Other factors contributing to the rapid urbanization occurring in developing nations are wars, conflicts and ecological damage. The general pattern of development is that as families become more affluent they move from the cities to the suburbs, which are the smaller communities that surround cities. In the mid-20th century in the US there was a mass exodus from cities to the suburbs. Specifically, between 1950 and 1990, the population of 58 U.S. metropolitan area grew by 80%, but the land area they covered rose by 305%. A metropolitan area is the geographic area that include a densely packed urban city center and the less populated suburbs surrounding it. The exodus to the suburbs was enabled by automobiles, more roads, and abundant, cheap oil. Business imported and exported resources, goods, waste. The U.S. government developed interstate highways. And suburbs delivered what people wanted, namely space, economic opportunities, cheaper real estate, lower crime rates and better schools. But this mass exodus caused natural areas to disappear, cars to become mandatory, an increase in traffic jams, and the merging of cities and towns into massive metro areas. You probably have heard the term sprawl before and may have a preconceived notion of what it means, but you should know how the word sprawl is defined. Sprawl is the spread of low-density urban or suburban development outward from an urban center. You often hear the word urban sprawl, which is essentially the same thing. Sprawl is problematic for many reasons, but one of the key reasons is because people take up more space in suburban areas than they do in urban or city centers. This image shows what urban sprawl looks like over the course of decades. On the left is a picture of Las Vegas in 1984 and on the right is the same location in 2009. Between the time these two photos were taken the population and developed areas of Las Vegas both tripled. If you live in one area long enough, you are very likely to see sprawl firsthand as cities tend to continue to push out and develop more on the edges of the city, gradually making the footprint of the city larger and larger. Here is an image of several standard approaches to suburban development, each of which will likely result in sprawl and the required use of a motor vehicle by citizens. In the top left you see an uncentered commercial strip development that consists of businesses built along one-long roads. The problem with this is that the businesses are far removed from the centralized community and city and thus requires people to drive to visit the business. On the top right you see a low-density single-use development, which is very common in the US. People who live in places like this have little option but to use their car to drive to work, school, business, or other places typical of everyday life. On the bottom left is a scattered or leapfrog development. While it might be appealing to the people living there that there are green spaces around them, these developments are built far away from city centers and often with little regard to how the area will develop in the future. Finally, in the bottom right you see a sparse street network. The problem here is that the areas between the developments is oddly shaped and not conducive for future development, and the areas that are undeveloped are not big enough to effectively function as natural areas or recreational areas. So why is sprawl a problem? To begin, all of the previously displayed geographic arrangements of homes and businesses, and other examples of sprawl not shown there, in general lack planning and further reinforce the reliance on cars. Sprawl also makes it difficult to incorporate mass transit options such as light rail. Sprawl causes pollution because it promotes the use of motor vehicles. This leads to emissions from carbon dioxide and nitrogen and sulfur compounds. This in turn causes smog, acid precipitation, and tropospheric ozone pollution. Tropospheric ozone is harmful to our health and is different from stratospheric ozone. We will discuss this later in the semester. Pollution also comes from motor oil and other pollutants on city streets that get into streams and ponds through stormwater runoff. Sprawl is detrimental to our physical health in other ways. It promotes physical inactivity and consequently gaining unnecessary weight because we rely on our cars. Studies have shown that people from the largest sprawled areas in the US are on average 6 pounds heavier and have higher blood pressure than people from areas that don't have as much sprawl. Inevitably, sprawl will change land use because we tear down forests, remove farms and ranches, and change other natural areas to expand cities and housing developments. It's estimated that we convert 2.5 million acres of agricultural land and forested land to suburban area each year. Sprawl also strains local economies because instead of spending tax dollars on maintaining existing areas or revitalizing areas a bit downtrodden, cities spend money expanding roads and other city services to the outliers of the city. For example, a study comparing sprawl versus compact development in Virginia found that if the city of Virginia Beach did not pursue compact development, it would spend 81% more money on infrastructure and operation costs would be 3.7 times greater. So what is to be done? Planning, that's what. Planning helps create livable and sustainable urban areas. City or urban planning is the design of cities to maximize their efficiency, functionality, and beauty. Regional planning must deal with the same issues as city or urban planning, however it just deals with these issues on a broader geographic scale. Urban planners want to beautify and impose order on fast-growing, unruly cities. City planning is not an entirely new concept. Washington, D.C. is the first example of a U.S. city that was planned. A famous French architect named Pierre-Charles L'Enfant planned D.C. L'Enfant used a Baroque style of city planning and included diagonal avenues that cut across a grid of streets and plenty of space for future parks and monuments. In 1901, well after L'Enfant laid the groundwork, city planners set restrictions on the height of buildings so that the monuments would not be overshadowed. If you visit D.C., try to imagine what it would look and feel like if the Washington Monument stood in the shadow of a massive skyscraper. By imposing those simple building height restrictions, the planners preserved the beauty and stately atmosphere of our capital city. To preserve cleanliness and tranquility of residential neighborhoods, industrial facilities are often barred from developing in residential districts through what is known as zoning. Zoning classifies specific areas for different types of development. By specifying zones for different types of development, planners can guide what is built where. Additionally, home buyers and business owners have security because they know in advance what types of developments can and cannot be located nearby. Zoning can limit sprawl because restrictions can be put in place to limit growth to existing urbanized areas. Additionally, it can help to revitalize downtowns because funds are spent on areas that are already developed rather than new developments. Zoning also protects agricultural and natural areas, ensures citizens have natural spaces to enjoy, and can keep infrastructure costs down. Urban growth boundaries, or UGBs, are a type of zoning restriction. UGBs are geographic line boundaries set by metropolitan areas. On one side of the line urban development can occur, however on the other side of the boundary the rural area is protected from development. Oregon and Washington are two states well known for using UGBs for regional planning. Beyond establishing zoning restrictions, sprawl can be controlled and countered through the city planning approaches called smart growth and new urbanism. Smart growth is the concept that promotes the rejuvenation of existing developed areas rather than the development of new areas. Key to this city planning and building approach is the idea that we should build up, not out, meaning that we should focus development and economic investment in existing urban areas and should favor multi-story buildings and shops and high-rises to keep the urban footprint as small as possible. Additionally, this approach advocates for a strong sense of place, meaning that it encourages community and stakeholder collaboration in development decisions, strengthening and beautifying of existing communities. Smart choice also seeks to have mixed land uses, compact building design, a range of housing options and designs, preserve open space, farmland, natural beauty and important environmental areas, provide a variety of transportation options, and to make development decisions predictable, fair and cost-effective. New urbanism is a related approach with the main focus of developing and designing compact walkable neighborhoods in which most of a family's needs can be met without using a car. New urbanism neighborhoods often have a public transit system. Transit-oriented development is a type of development that is in line with new urbanism because it advocates for communities to be arranged along stops and major rail lines so that people can easily use mass transit to get to where they need to go by foot and rail. Transit options help cities because a great deal of pollution, stress, and lost time are associated with traveling by personal vehicles. According to Texas A&M annual mobility study, traffic caused Americans to spend 5.5 billion more hours in traveling and an extra 2.9 billion gallons of gas. This equals 56 billion unnecessary pounds of carbon dioxide released into the atmosphere because cars are sitting in traffic jams. This averages out to 38 hours per commuter each year in wasted time and equates to $121 billion in lost revenue because people were stuck in traffic and not working. The positive side of this is that on average, the time wasted in traffic has declined since its peak in 2005, when Americans spent 43 hours per year stuck in traffic. As the graphs show, automobiles and buses consume far more energy than rail systems per passenger mile. The key to improving the quality of urban life is therefore to incorporate mass transit. Options include trains, subways, buses and light rail. Light rail is a smaller rail system that is powered by electricity. Light rail is cheaper, more energy efficient, cleaner, and relieves traffic. The most used U.S. train systems are in large cities such as New York and Boston, each of which carry approximately 25% of each city's daily commuters. Buses are another option. Portland's buses carry 66 million per year and each bus keeps 250 cars off the road each day. Most nations have extensive mass transit and Japan, China and EU have modern high-speed bullet trains, however the US lags behind in mass transit systems. Why is US mass transit behind? We lag behind because we invested in roadways because we have low population density and cheap fuel, compared to other industrialized nations. High-speed rail is another option for mass transit. In 2009, the U.S. Congress passed a bill that earmarked $8 billion for high-speed rail, which is a train that travels at speeds at least 110 miles per hour. There are plans for these rail systems in California, the Midwest, New England, Texas, Florida, the Pacific Northwest, Colorado, New Mexico, and Pennsylvania. However, as of 2015, only construction on the rail in California has begun. It's no surprise that urban residents need parklands. Almost everyone appreciates outdoor space. City dwellers want to escape the noise, commotion, and stress of urban life, so it's important to have natural lands. Public parks and open space provide greenery, beauty, freedom, and recreation. Having these spaces also protects lands that can provide ecosystem services such as filtering pollutants, climate regulation, and wildlife habitat. Spaces don't have to be huge to make a difference. Even small spaces, such as playgrounds and community gardens, can be important. Another type of natural area preserved or designed by city planning is greenways, which are stretches of vegetated parks along rivers, streams, or canals that often connect neighborhoods or parks through a system of walking and biking paths. Greenbelts are similar to greenways. Greenbelts are long, wide corridors of parklands that often encircle entire urban areas. Greenbelts can be used as urban growth boundaries, so sprawl is contained and natural areas are preserved for the citizens of the city. Beyond providing ecosystem services and corridors for wildlife, urban parks, greenbelts and greenways also help boost property values and provide people a place to gather and recreate. More and more buildings are being constructed following energy-efficient standards and which strive to have the smallest environmental impact possible. This movement in architecture and construction has brought about the term green building. A green building is a building that uses technology to well-planned designs to minimize the ecological footprint of the structure. Considering buildings use 40% of our energy and 70% of our electricity, it's easy to see why there is a need to develop buildings with smaller footprints. When I say footprints, I mean both the area they physically take up and the resources they require to operate. Green buildings are built from sustainable materials, limit energy and water use, control their pollution, and recycle wastes. They are especially popular at colleges and universities. Green buildings are certified under the U.S. Green Building Council, which promotes the construction of green buildings through their leadership in energy and environmental design, aka LEED certification program. New or existing buildings can be granted silver, gold, or platinum status based on projected performance. The Interdisciplinary Life Sciences building at Texas A&M is a gold certified building. There are widely disputed problems with LEED in that the certification is based on plans, not actual use of the building. Certification relies on energy models and stated energy use versus actual energy use can be very different. Another trend taking hold in the U.S. in regard to sustainable urban living is micro or tiny house or apartments. These are homes that are between 90 and 500 square feet that are efficient and low impact. In some cases, they are less than a tenth the size of a standard U.S. home. Tiny houses have a small ecological footprint, by design, and can be prefabricated or custom built. Because they are so small, it is also much easier to live entirely off the grid, or in other words to power the home using renewable energy such as solar or wind power. I've provided a link to a gallery of tiny homes in the Week 8 presentations, videos, and mini lectures folder on eCampus. I've also provided a link to a video that takes you on a tour of a tiny 350 square foot apartment in New York City that transforms the space to allow a variety of activities. You don't have to watch this, but it's only 5 minutes and 30 seconds and it's pretty amazing to see. The theme of this mini lecture is clearly urban sustainability. Ironically, when we try to improve our cities by making them safer, more efficient, cleaner, healthier, or more pleasant, we can at the same time make them more sustainable. The benefits of a sustainable city are: it functions over the long term. Generations will have a good quality of life. It minimizes impacts on natural systems and resources. Urban centers or cities are often given a bad rap in terms of their environmental impact, but it should be recognized that urban centers have both positive and negative environmental impacts. Let's consider the positives first. Because people are packed densely in cities, more land outside cities is left undeveloped. The density of cities also allow efficient delivery of goods and services, such as electricity, education, water and sewer system. Cities are easier to travel in and through without the use of a personal vehicle. Cities promote a flourishing cultural life and are hubs for innovation, research, education, and technology, which can all lead to even more energy-efficient and environmental-friendly ways of doing things. Cities are also engines of technological and artistic inventiveness that can solve other societal problems. The downsides of cities is that they are typically resource sinks, meaning people often have to import resources, such as food, clothing, and building materials. Importing these things usually requires fossil fuels be burned for transportation. Cities require large expanses of land elsewhere for resources and ecosystem services. For example, they need places to dispose of their trash and they need water reserves for their citizens. In addition to creating airborne and waterborne pollution, cities also give off noise, light, and thermal pollution. Noise pollution is harmful or annoying levels of sound, such as would be created from an airport, industry, or traffic. Light pollution is the light given off by city buildings which obscures the view of stars in the night sky or which creeps in windows and makes it difficult for people to sleep at night. Thermal pollution from a city is caused by the heat generating or absorbing structures and objects of a city. For example, buildings, vehicles, factories and people all emit heat. Additionally, heat-absorbing surfaces like pavement trap this generated heat. When concentrated in a location, this heat adds up and makes the city warmer than the surrounding area. So much so that city centers are measurably and consistently warmer than the suburbs, farmland, and natural areas away from the city center. This phenomenon is called the urban heat island effect. There is a branch of ecology called urban ecology, which holds that cities can be viewed explicitly as ecosystems and that the fundamentals of ecosystem ecology can be applied to the urban environment. Urban ecologists, urban planners, and sustainability specialists advocate that cities can reduce their environmental impacts and improve the lives of their citizens by pursuing sustainable, ecosystem-based approaches to city management. Specifically, these specialists recommend cities use resources efficiently and develop environmentally friendly technologies, account fully for external costs, offer tax incentives for sustainable practices, use locally produced resources, use organic waste and wastewater to fertilize soil, and encourage urban agriculture, recycling, urban agriculture, mass transit, and job training for poor. This is just some of the things cities can do to be more sustainable. This type of sustainability is happening and in many places, but slowly. One shining example of a city striving for sustainability is New York City. They have the goal of becoming the first environmentally sustainable 21st century city. They plan to reduce greenhouse gases, improve mass transit, plant trees, clean up polluted land and rivers, and enhance access to parks. And all for good reason. The city will have 1 million more people by 2030. They have already had some success. They have increased energy efficiency, planted 430,000 trees, improved 180 playgrounds, installed 200-mile bike lanes, and acquired 29,000 acres to protect the water supply. Sustainability at the city level is possible. It just takes planning, concerned and active citizens, and the will to act. In conclusion, as half the human population has moved to urban lifestyles, our environmental impact has changed. Impacts are less direct but more far-reaching. Urban sustainability makes cities better places to live. Planning and zoning involve long-term visions. Smart growth and new urbanism reduce energy use. Mass transit reduce energy use and emissions. Parks provide health and ecosystem services, and green buildings provide multiple environmental and human health benefits. This concludes this mini lecture on the urban environment and sustainable cities. Please review the weekly outline and complete the activities for this week per the schedule set forth in the outline.